Welcome to the Functional Nurse Podcast, where we explore how nurses are transforming healthcare through functional medicine and nurse-led innovation. I'm your host, Brigitte Sager, founder of the Institute for Functional Nursing. Here, we're reclaiming our role as healers and leaders, one root cause conversation at a time. Hello and welcome to this episode of the Functional Nurse Podcast. My name is Brigitte Sager and I'm your host. Today I have a guest that I'm really excited to interview. Lindsey Buhl has been a nurse and now is a functional nurse. I'm going to tell you more about her background in just a second, but Lindsey, I'm really excited to talk today. Thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I wanted to give everybody a little bit of your background first and then we'll get started. Lindsey has been a nurse for 15 years, and the majority of her nursing experience has been in emergency, trauma, and critical care. After going through her own autoimmune health crisis, she began seeking answers to questions she had about her own health, and she found those answers in functional medicine. She has now made a total shift in her practice and career. Lindsey took the Integrative Nurse Coach Academy's Functional Medicine for Nurses course, and she was in cohort number 5, which transformed what she thought was possible for RNs to do in the wellness space without seeking additional advanced licensure. She now seeks to educate and empower people to be informed consumers of healthcare and advocates as partners in their healthcare team. She provides this education for free in a way that increases access and helps meet people's needs, no matter where they are in their journey. Lindsey is now running a YouTube channel, Revival Health RN, where she provides functional medicine education and tips for healthy living. And she's also doing some in-home IV services that I want to hear more about. Lindsey is most proud of her decision to fully focus on functional medicine as her career. For years, she struggled with cognitive dissonance between how she was practicing in her workplace and what she knew to be best practice. She's thrilled to be able to devote all of her attention and energy to helping people truly get well from the inside out. So I would like to start there, Lindsey. Can you talk about that journey of yours to becoming a nurse and then where you are now in your practice?
Yeah, so I became a nurse in 2008, and really what took me into nursing, I think, is what takes most people into nursing, the desire to help others. I really love science. I'm kind of
Mm-hmm.
a like that. I'm the kind of person who will read, research, and listen to podcasts and read books all the time just for my own personal development because I love to know the inner workings of the human body. And so it seemed like becoming a nurse was a natural fit for me. I went straight into the emergency room after I finished nursing school, and that was like a baptism by fire in there. And I spent many years in that sort of high stress, high stakes nursing environment. And, I really do appreciate and value a lot of the work that I did there, but it began to open my eyes to more questions and answers about why are we seeing so many people coming in so young and so sick? Why are the same people coming back all the time for the same problems? Why are we just ending up with a prescription and a discharge, and we're not really making a long-term difference in people's lives? So that's kind of my background as a nurse. And then I ended up finding functional medicine, as I think many people do, when my own health sort of hit a breaking point. So that was,
I think that's so common, right? I hear that all the time, that's how nurses find functional medicine initially.
yeah, and I think it's really unfortunate because, we're entering that healthcare system as an informed consumer, right? Like we know how the system works and we're entering into it as a nurse. And it's not really until you are the patient that you really understand how dysfunctional it is and how few answers you
Mhm.
get and how you will be turfed around from doctor to doctor to doctor who seemingly wants to do every test on you in the book that are all coming back normal, and you feel terrible and you really begin to peel back all of the layers of what you thought you knew to be true. And that's what happened to me. I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's in 2013. It really was my own doing that led me into functional medicine. I was told, here's some Synthroid, come back and see me in 6 months.
Mm.
And when I wasn't better, I, I began to dig, and that opened up the entire box of functional medicine. And that's where I've decided to plant myself to try to help other people who are having the same experience of being very frustrated about the answers that they're getting and concerned that they're physically not improving much or at all with the conventional therapies.
And I think too, when you see yourself get better and you've been a nurse for a while and then you use some functional medicine practices on yourself and you get better, it's like it just is like the blinders are off, and then you go back to work and you're like, this is not, I've read a lot of nurses mention that recently when they write things to me or we talk about it, is they'll say that it didn't align with how they take care of themselves anymore, the kind of care that they're giving their patients.
Absolutely. I
So
felt
finding
this,
a way to to be able to share it in practice, I think is so great.
yes, I felt the same way, and I it wasn't really until probably 2018 where I really went all in and decided to commit. I was kind of straddling the fence a little bit and probably a little bit nervous to advocate all the way for myself. I still was trying to accept what I was being told and then do my own research, but it wasn't until I got the courage really to confront my healthcare providers and began to have more informed conversations that I really started to feel, okay, now I know what's going on with me. And now I feel like that I know all of this other stuff that I never learned in nursing school. I had to use it in a way to help other people because everywhere I turn, friends and family are coming to me and asking me questions and saying, I am taking this and I don't feel better, or I've got this weird thing going on. Do you have any idea what this could be? It's kind of like opening Pandora's box. Such a gift because it has changed my entire life. I am certain that I would not be where I am today health wise if I were not practicing functional medicine in my own home.
Well, and that's probably, I would imagine, why so many people around you are coming to you and asking you for some clarity because they've seen the change that in your health, over the years that you've been doing this.
Yes, they
I say a lot,
saw,
that's the proof's in the pudding with that, right? Sorry.
yes, they saw after my third child was born in 2018, I was so debilitated to the with such inflammation to the point where I was barely I was barely functioning. Was hearing my baby cry in the crib, and I would start to cry because my physical body hurt so much that I knew that I was going to have to go and pick her up out of the crib and feed her, and my joints hurt so badly and my body hurt so badly, and that just that act of caring for my children was so difficult for me that if you knew me then and you knew me now, you can see that I really have revived my health. And that's why I named my channel that, because I really do believe that we can bring it back to life to where we
Mhm.
started it.
I really like your name, Revival Health RN, and I think it's cool to hear where it came from. And I am curious too, from being in the course, we'll talk about like, oh, what are you going to call yourself? How do you describe what you do? We all choose our terms that we'll use. What do you call yourself and how do you describe that to people?
So I call myself a functional medicine nurse, and one of my biggest passions really is education. And I know that for me, at different times in my life, and for many people, functional medicine is hidden behind a cost wall. There are times when it can be cost prohibitive, or people have the perception that it has to be expensive. And so, what I wanted to do with my channel was to really provide low cost, high yield information for people that they can practice right away. They can take whatever parts of it relate to their story and begin to implement them at low or no cost and have access to really qualified information, right? There's no shortage of instructors or educators on the internet. This we know. There are people who have zero qualifications who are giving advice, and it's very confusing for people to know what on earth they should do with their health, what they should eat, what they should not eat, how to take care of themselves well. And so I feel like with education being the core of what we do as nurses, this is a way for me to get information out to the masses where they can access it for free.
And people trust nurses. And I think, sometimes it comes up often. Nurses will say, oh, if I do nurse coaching, should I call myself a nurse coach or a health coach? And I think the value there is behind all of our education and licensure and how trusted we are as a profession. I think that the nursing part is so valuable. And then for you to be able to share it with people openly and they're like, okay, and I heard this from a nurse, right? It's just not some like random quote unquote expert on the internet. So I think there's so much credibility there.
I definitely agree. There's so much noise in that space that it's hard to get sound information. And so that's what I'm trying to provide, true scientific information that is applicable to most people, that they can take from it whatever they need, but they can come and find inspiration and find hope that their situation can be better.
And you choose the term functional medicine. Like when I looked at, like your YouTube videos and social media, it really is we talk about that idea of like if you're not going to use a lot of testing and recommend a ton of supplements, then maybe you want to call yourself a lifestyle nurse or a holistic nurse because it's easier for people to get. But it sounds like you've had such a change in your health specifically from functional medicine that that term really aligns with you.
It really does, and I find that a lot of people don't know what that term means. What on earth is functional medicine? And so it's a way also for me to introduce people to that concept, that there is something out there that really truly is geared towards improving their function in life. And so I do prefer that term.
And how do you feel about on that same thread of talking about whether you use testing or not, things for you for scope of practice, like when you looked into what you could do as an RN and then what you could do in your state, how do you feel about your scope of practice and using functional medicine in your nursing practice?
Well, I believe that there is so much that is available to us that we can encourage our patients, friends, and family that do not require testing. Now, of course, there are some circumstances where testing is indicated, and I always try to link people up to find a licensed provider who can order tests for them if needed. But I find that by changing your lifestyle, your habits, your diet, all of that, you can see such an improvement in your quality of life that oftentimes you don't need to go the route of testing. And I definitely advise a food first approach, which we learned a lot about in the course. Food first is huge. I do believe that it doesn't have to be expensive, doesn't have to be time consuming. It doesn't have to be this giant elephant that you have to, take on. You can make small changes in your life. And so that's one thing that I'm really wanting to encourage people, is that these lifestyle changes, these habits and such, they're not out of reach for the everyday person. And, when you look at a functional medicine provider's website, you may feel like this is not accessible to me right now. And then I therefore feel stuck. So
Yep.
that there's a lot to be done. There's a lot to be offered and said that is pretty much low to no cost for people that can have a huge impact.
I really love your perspective of trying to make it accessible to everybody. And I think, there's definitely the argument of like food deserts where like people have trouble accessing like fresh fruits and vegetables. And that's definitely an important topic. But I agree, like so much of what we end up actually educating our patients on is avoiding things in their lives that might be causing harm and like shifting their food choices and shifting how much time they're sitting and how much time they're moving, their sleep priorities, things like that. And all of that is in theory free, right? I mean, the food is the exception, I think, to that.
Right. And I always believe also that there's a continuum of choices, right? There's poor, good, better, best. And so I feel like wherever you are on that continuum, we can just slide you up one notch, even maybe two, maybe
Mm,
three.
yep.
It doesn't have to be from poor to best. I know that in this economic environment that we're in, it's not accessible for everybody to go to best. But can you go to better? And so I think providing that information and helping to empower people to make informed choices on the things that matter the most is what I'm really passionate about.
Yeah, and I'm like, if you have somebody that's in poor health, and let's say they have chronic pain every day, and some of that's related to drinking a case of soda, then maybe they're having diet soda all day long, and it's impacting, their body in several ways, and maybe they have some chronic health conditions and chronic pain, and we get them to where they're having a few less, they're not gonna get to, like you're talking, better. But if we get them to where they're not in poor health and they can actually be a little bit more active and their chronic pain improves from reducing some of the things in their lifestyle choices that are contributing to that, that can have a trickle down effect, right? Because then, okay, we got them to pretty okay. and then they feel better enough to make some more progress. And I think it's motivating too, right? We get somebody just a little further, but like a little bit better, and I like to think of it as a spectrum, just like you're describing, and if we can't get everybody to like the perfection, there's no such thing in our health, I think, but shifting anytime we can shift them in the right direction, I think it's wonderful.
Yes, I feel like when someone begins to feel better, even in an incremental way, they get the buy-in into their own health and feel like, okay, wow, this really is making a difference. And then maybe they're more interested in hearing the other things that you have to say.
Mhm.
It's like you're just climbing the ladder one step at a time.
Yeah. Well, and how off-putting is it if they come to you and you say, "Oh, here's how to eat perfectly." And they're like, "Well, that's completely not gonna happen," right? So, I think the incremental can be really important for keeping people on the right track too.
Yes. And you have to assess where people are in their readiness for change. What are they willing to do? What are they able to do in the season of life and the stage they are and the financial situation they're in? What can they do, and start small and work your way up from there, because not everybody is completely ready to
Mhm.
overhaul their diet and their lifestyle and their sleep and their environment and their personal care products. It can seem overwhelming, but if I can maybe just get you to stop drinking soda first, I'm taking that as a win.
Yep, absolutely. So, how can you tell us more about what you're doing right now? You mentioned before we hit record that are doing some in-home care, and I wanted to talk about like what that's like, because for me, I have not done in-home care myself. I did when I was working on my bachelor's. I did one of my clinicals was to follow a home health nurse, and it was really fun, but I really enjoyed it, and like seeing the same people every week with her was fun. It was a big learning experience for me to go into people's homes and like see them less as patients and more as humans and see how they live. But also all those things that you learn to screen people for when you like, you worked in the hospital too. It's like, oh, the fall risk and what's it like at home, and do you grab bars and all those things. You like your wheels are turning the whole time for me. So I wanted to hear what it's been like for you, not just going in people's homes, but now having the functional medicine perspective and going in people's homes.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and I tell you, I really do enjoy it a lot. So I'm working with a local nurse practitioner who is very holistically minded. She herself actually does almost exclusively in-home care. So she sees people like good old-fashioned
Oh,
calls, and it's been such a blessing to be a part of her team, because we really do try to see people, as you're saying, as humans, not just as patients or names on a list. We're going into their homes and spending time with them. At this point, what I'm doing is in home IV infusions. And so I am spending a chunk of time with these patients. I'm coming in, I'm doing an assessment, taking vitals, putting in the IV, hanging the IV. And in that time, we have a lot of time to talk. And my boss has pretty much given me freedom to talk with them about anything functional medicine related that comes up. And she's given me permission to recommend things and discuss and talk about lifestyle or whatever they have. And when you have time, like we never had in the hospital, right? You don't have an hour to sit and talk with them and talk with their spouse or their children or other people who live in the home. You have a real opportunity to make a connection that you can't do in the hospital. It's been such a gift. And So and now I have permission and the education
Mm.
to speak to people in their homes, and it's just when they're in their most comfortable setting, and it's been honestly really fun. I have really enjoyed that as a very different change of scenery from working in the hospital.
Do you have any tricks for, like, figuring out how much they wanna hear? Because we talk about that, like, not everybody wants to hear our long spiel. They want their medications. So, like, is there a way that you kind of evaluate how where to go with them in your conversations?
So sometimes we'll we can start when I'm reviewing their health history with them, and I can say, you know, tell me about this diagnosis or tell me about that diagnosis and how are things going, and that gives an opportunity to discuss more. I know that the nurse practitioner that I'm working with is seen in a more holistic light in our community, and so sometimes
Mm.
I can say, how did you hear about us, and that will give us some information, and like, I heard about them from this person or that person who's really into natural health, or there are some that are not really interested in natural health, but just want to be seen in their home for the convenience factor. And so that opens up some opportunities to talk about their diagnoses and different things that they have going on. And, I can just plant little seeds and say, well, have you ever considered this? Or have you ever thought about this as an option? And just kind of test it out and see what they say. And if they're open to it, then that kind of gives me opportunity to go with my full spiel of information, which I definitely and is honestly, usually well received. Most people who are unhappy with their health are looking for other opportunities to improve it. So that's been my primary way that I've been able to kind of just see if people are really interested in it or not.
Okay, so I wanna take that back to the hospital when we were talking earlier about you started trial by fire in the emergency room, and that had me thinking of when I went to nursing school and graduated. I thought I wanted to be a midwife, and then halfway through, I got a job in the hospital, and I really enjoyed as I was a nurse tech, I really enjoyed being with the mostly older adults that I was caring for, and, like, I realized that a lot of what I was into was the teaching and the biochemistry and, like, looking at labs and thinking about how the medications might interact, all those things. But so I never expected to work in a hospital until I got that job, which, paid the bills at the time. And I think in nursing school, I kind of just really started to believe that, like, the hospital is where you go, or, long-term care facility, like that's where nurses work. And during times like when I would like follow the home health nurse when I did my bridge to BSN, that opened my eyes a little bit. And then I started to think more about where nurses can work in other ways, but still not in this like holistic and a little bit more entrepreneur kind of perspective. And I think when you're in the hospital, it kind of feels like this is what it feels like to be a nurse, like welcome to the club. It's stressful all the time, and our work impacts our health. And then if we fast forward till now for both of us, it's like realizing that that's not true. Culturally, maybe as nurses, we kind of like put that on our profession that it needs to be that we sacrifice some of ourselves in order to take good care of other people. But I mean, you're a great example of that not being the case. And so I wanted to hear your thoughts on that and hear like how much do you think stress was playing a role in your health at the time that you found holistic care more?
Sure. So every time that I tell someone that I meet that I'm a nurse, their first question is always, what hospital do you work at? And I say, well, I don't practice in a
Mhm.
hospital at this point anymore. It's always interesting to hear people and their ideas of what they think a nurse should do. And it's been really
Mm.
it's been so much fun to explore all of the other options. When I became a nurse, I wanted to do emergency room. I wanted to be like a trauma nurse practitioner and do all of that stuff. And I can definitely see how the stress of that environment impacted my health. At the time, I was working two ER jobs. I was training for a marathon. I was running like 60 plus miles a week. I was nuts. I would wake up in the morning and I would run like 10 miles and then I would go work my 11 to 11 shift. Okay. This is how crazy
Mhm.
it was. And at that
And you
time,
got more miles then.
I got so many miles. I felt like it was some kind of a badge of honor that I was able to do all of this, and now I realize how much I was wearing myself down into the ground. And I really wish that I had learned 10 years ago, 15 years ago, how to care for myself better. When you're in the hospital setting, especially in a very acute setting like the emergency room, there's not really time for you to care for yourself. You are going from thing to patient, from one emergency to another, and you would I would get to the end of my shift and think, what in the world just happened? Like there was no,
Mhm.
you couldn't drink water, lunch was a joke, it never existed, and that kind of thing. It was so stressful. And while I definitely appreciate and think that, that kind of care is needed at times. And I'm so thankful that it exists. But I'm also so thankful that I'm not a part of that machine anymore.
So many of my friends that worked with me on like the higher acuity floors, had so many chronic health conditions develop after becoming a nurse. And I think for me, stress was the big thing. And I was doing high acuity stuff like you, but my best friend was the one of my best friends was the director of the emergency department. And I still like that sounds like too much for me. And I at least know that know that now. But I always felt like step down units and the ICU was often controlled chaos. It was like I had a clinical instructor say to me in nursing school, get your drama at work. And I thought that was cool, like, because I think I was younger and I like you're talking about, like, there's some thrill from it maybe. And I definitely don't ever want any in my personal life. So the work part sounded perfect. But I would go help because I did do critical care floats, so I would go help in the emergency room sometimes, and I was like, "No, thank you. This is like you have no idea what's gonna happen every minute, and who's gonna be available to help you." And at least in the ICU, we kinda had a plan for, like, how we were gonna do things. But it's just the stress of the emergency room makes me think of war. Like, you just have no idea what's gonna happen all the time, and I think as nurses, I started to hear that term of, like, having PTSD as a nurse when I was, like, working maybe 10 years ago, people started to talk about that, and I think it's real. I've had some really dear friends have extremely traumatic things happen at work in an acute setting, and we don't acknowledge so much the impact that that has on us of, like, stress for, like you said, 11 to 11, that's 12 hours straight of just, like, extreme fight or flight mode, and so, yeah,
Absolutely.
what role does that have in our health story, and how much did that impact, what happened for you? And so now, for us to have jobs that are a little bit less stressful, I think it's really wonderful that we can still help people without being in that state all the time.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that, when you know better, you do better. And now I know better, that I'm not interested in running myself to the ground anymore, that my health matters. And how on earth can I be a health promoter and a health educator if I'm not caring for my own self? And that's something that I feel was very prevalent in that emergency room setting. It's like a badge of honor if you worked a double and didn't take a lunch. And now it's not going to be me anymore. I have found.
Yeah, because then you have to ask what's the price you pay, right?
Right. And I know so many people that I've worked with over the years who have heard about what I've been doing, who have seen my health improve. I mean, there was a period of time when I was working where I missed chunks of work due to my autoimmune things. When it was first happening, I would miss chunks of work, and because I was literally unable to do the tasks that I needed to do. And so now I feel like people have seen that and are seeing the light, like we were saying earlier. They can see that maybe there is another way that I could be living and taking
Mhm.
care of myself. Maybe there are other opportunities where I can use my nursing skills, right? Like I'm still using my conventional nursing skills, taking vitals, I'm starting IVs, I'm hanging IV fluids and things like that. But I'm also allowed to be a human caring for humans. And that has been such a gift.
I like that because, yeah, I don't think that we feel like I did not feel like a human so much in the hospital, probably more of a cog, in a wheel. And I I know that you mentioned that you really wanted to talk in this about balancing like the blend of functional and conventional medicine. And we do need nurses in the hospital. We do need nurses in all settings of healthcare. And now a quick word about our sponsor, the Institute for Functional Nursing. IFN is the leading education and community platform for nurses bringing functional medicine into their practice. IFN offers everything from short on-demand contact hour courses to the full functional nursing program designed specifically for nurses and nurse practitioners ready to practice root cause, whole person care. If you're looking for connection and real-time learning, the functional nursing membership includes 4 live meetings every month where we cover case studies and have open discussions and connection. Come be a part of a movement that's redefining what it means to be a nurse. Visit fxnursing.com to learn more and join us. And now back to today's episode. And I think there's just as much value for both, but the shift I think is that we have for so long been trying to figure out the downstream things. What are we going to do to be the very best type of healthcare practitioner in these acute settings and in chronic health pictures and people coming to the hospital because their chronic health problems have caught up with them versus the going upstream part that we're participating in more now as functional nurses. And in the course, we talk about that, the idea that you wanted to talk about functional medicine and conventional medicine being a partnership that's really important for us to acknowledge. And I think I've gotten better at articulating it since your cohort too. I try to make sure to talk to students really early on in the course about the fact that this isn't a replacement. It's something that we should be using more and more in healthcare to keep people from needing to end up in the hospital ever. Like hopefully this becomes more everyday practice for all healthcare practitioners in the future that we're considering the why and doing a lot of preventative work and talking about the true value of thinking about what you eat and what you're exposed to and how you care for yourself. And so, so I wanted to hear your thoughts on that too, because I think it's an important topic that we don't talk about enough, that we're not trying to replace anything or say functional medicine's better than. They're totally different.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think that some people want to, go into one side and be very polarized and think, well, I'm only going to do these things that are natural. Other people are thinking, well, that's all out there in woo woo. I'm only going to follow this. But there has to be a marriage, right? Because when we didn't have all the pharmaceuticals and we didn't have all of that available to us, what did people do? Now, obviously,
Mhm.
there are tremendous amount of benefits from modern medicine in many ways, and I believe that there is a middle ground that most of us can walk. It doesn't have to be either or; it can be both and. And there are some conditions that are going to require lifelong medication. I take several medications lifelong to help me with my Hashimoto's, but I have been able
Mhm.
to limit the progression of that disease through my lifestyle choices and how I'm caring for myself. And so there has to be a benefit for both camps. So I think that we have to consider, what is the problem, right? I see all the time on some of these online threads when people are coming on and they might say, oh, my child was just diagnosed with strep throat and I don't want to do antibiotics and what should I do? And so I try to think, well, there is a time and place for modern medicine, right? I personally would choose to treat that with antibiotics, but use the information that I have to restore the gut afterwards, right? It doesn't have to be, I'm
Mhm.
only going
Mhm.
to do this one side or I'm only going to do that, right? We can be wise consumers of the healthcare information that we are receiving and we can learn how to support our bodies. There are people who, for whatever reasons, they have their own reasons, who might say, I need to stay on my birth control pills. Okay, well, that's an opportunity for me to come alongside you and educate. Okay, that's your choice. Here's what you can be doing to help support yourself while you're doing that. Here are some things that you
Mhm.
might want to consider. You might want to take some B vitamins. You might want to like, there are some other ideas that you might want to do to protect your microbiome from the changes that are going to be happening. So it doesn't have to be either or. You know, there's such a beautiful middle ground if you can turn off all the noise and see it.
What a great example, the birth control, like that, we can have an opinion of what a perfect plan might look like for us, and what it might look like for somebody else is totally different. And we still need to be able to take what we're offering and merge those things together. And so I think that's a great example, supporting somebody in their choices. And you said wise consumer, and it was making me think about, I like that term a lot, but we're nurses, and so how informed are we out the door? Because
Mhm.
we have the knowledge we have, right? And so it really highlights for me what we talk about a lot in the course is about nurses. We know more than we acknowledge that we do. And we still struggle with our own health until, and with functional medicine, we can heal people along a spectrum. Maybe we get them completely better, maybe we get them somewhat better, but we can be that bridge to wisdom for people, right? Because they're like, okay, I'm getting a ton of health information from 10 different sources every day, and I don't even know where to start. And so exactly what you're saying, like having a lot of things from conventional healthcare, we don't want to discourage, but we also can offer a lot of education to people that are trying to make wise health choices.
Yes, I feel like in a way we can help to be the filter for people as they're trying to sort through the information that they've received and help them to process it and put it into terms that they can understand and that they can actually implement and put into practice in their own lives.
And the other thing you said that I wanted to talk about a little bit more is about the spectrum of healing, right? You made me think about the idea that we use the term healing a lot, I think, as functional nurses. And I think it is profound how often you can literally make somebody not have a health diagnosis anymore by using functional medicine practices with them. And so as functional nurses, we literally can heal people to the degree of like 100%. You no longer have this diagnosis anymore. But it also is, I think, really important to acknowledge that it's a spectrum, right? And so, what percentage we can make it where, like you said, it isn't getting worse, or maybe it's drastically better than it was. And you're a really great example of that. So, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it.
Sure. I really do believe that when we're assessing our clients, we have to first determine what are their goals. What are they hoping to accomplish? In some cases, as you're saying, we can help them completely heal from something and reverse all of that damage. In some cases, there has already been a good amount of damage done, and our goal is to seriously improve your quality of life or reduce or eliminate your pain. What is their goal for adding the functional medicine piece? And so I think that there is a lot to be said for bringing that patient on board and hearing what they have to say. What are they hoping to accomplish here? And then meeting them where they are and helping them take the baby steps to wherever it is that they want to go. Not every disease is going to be completely reversible. There are some people like me who will be on some medication for their lifetime. But for me, when I was able to implement all of these changes that I made in my own life, they were about to put me on biologics. And I was like, I don't think I want to do that. Especially working in the emergency room, but I'm gonna be I'm just be sick all the time, I'll just be
Mhm.
sick
Yep.
all the time. And so I've been able to stay off of those for over 10 years, which has been such a blessing for me. Like I have been able to reduce my chronic pain by 95%. And so for me, that was the goal. Like I don't know that I'll ever be completely healed from my Hashimoto's, but is my quality of life unbelievably better? Yes, it is. And so I think that's something that we need to assess when we're first working with someone. What are they hoping to achieve? What is possible? There's always more possible than they think, because sometimes they will be told there is no cure. It doesn't matter what you eat. There is no impact on your disease from your lifestyle. And that's, for the overwhelming majority of people, not true. There is a lot to be said for your lifestyle. There is a lot to be said for what you eat and how you live and how you sleep and how you care for yourself. There's, in addition to assessing their goals, you have to, like, you can educate them that there is probably more possible than what they've been told. Because that was the case for me. I was
Mhm.
told that it didn't matter what I ate, it didn't matter how I lived, that my extremely stressful life and job wasn't really a big deal because I was young and I was resilient. Well, that is not true. My entire life changed when I began to understand that, for me, being healthy is not just the absence of symptoms. Being healthy is being well on a cellular level at the foundation of my life, not just the absence of symptoms, because things can take a long time to slowly brew in your body before you develop those symptoms. And you don't know sometimes what is going on even in your own body at that time. And
That
so
was
people also need to realize, on the flip side, that it's not going to be an immediate change, right? You have to commit to the process of caring for yourself. Health is not a destination, it is a journey that is ongoing forever, and there's really no end, because as we continue to grow as people, and our health and lives will change. And other times in life, we have more capacity to do more and to try more things. I'm at a place now where my youngest child is now 5. So I'm sleeping again and I have all this energy, and I'm now able to do and to have the physical, emotional, mental capacity for things that I could not have considered 5 years ago. And so it's all happening on a spectrum.
95% is a lot better, like what you said a minute ago. I mean, that's wild. And I think it was your cohort that we had one of the first couples who, because now I know this is a controversial topic, but this has come up so many times now that I know for sure that it's a thing. Students telling me and telling us in the Zoom meetings and writing about it in things that they share with the course participants, that they will have children. They found functional medicine because they have children with either autism or ADHD, and they looked for something different. And, their child went from like nonverbal and, not able to feed themselves to like being completely undiagnosed severe autism after using functional medicine practices. And I know that that's a topic that not everybody is excited to hear yet, but I think that's the future, is that we're going to acknowledge that a lot of the things that we have decided are permanent diagnoses for people, we really can. I mean, even in that situation, that particular person sharing their story, it was even if it wasn't undiagnosed, the fact that they could talk and go to school and participate in a regular classroom with their peers and eat and feed themselves. Like, I mean, just oh my gosh. And 10 years ago, I don't know what I would have thought if I'd heard that from somebody, but now I've heard so many case studies in functional medicine of that, other practitioners experiencing that, but now I've had tons of students tell me really similar stories, and it's just incredible.
I've been hearing a lot of the same thing. We inherit our parents' toxic load, right? This we now know. And so this has been an interesting little thing, even in my own home, and it's very small scale, but I had been concerned about my youngest child's behavior for some time, when she was small, when she was like a toddler. And it wasn't until I really cleaned up my entire family's diet that I realized that I was contributing to her behavior. When I improved everything that she was eating, when I completely eliminated food dyes, telling you, my child, night and day, behavior, attitudes, able to handle her emotions. I mean, it was unbelievable. And I think that's one small change. And that's what I'm hoping to educate people on, is that not everything is as permanent as they say that it is. There is so much that you can do that can not only impact you as a person, but the next generation of people, our children, the future. They say that that like kids my kids' age will be the first generation that will have a shorter lifespan than their parents. I read that recently, and that just hit me so hard in thinking, why, with all of our modern technology and health innovation, are we not improving length of life, right? It's because so much of what we're doing, as you were saying, is downstream. If you get to the point where you're already sick, it takes a lot more effort to turn around and swim upstream and fix the problem. But we are poised at such an important time, I think, as nurses, as sisters and friends and wives and caregivers and daughters, to educate the people around us so we can truly impact the health of this next generation. That's something that I'm so passionate about because I know, at least in my home, once I became educated and empowered, that changed my entire household. My husband, all three kids have now turned like a sharp left and are living in a way that is sustainable for true long-term health. And that's what we have the power to do as nurses is we can really impact long term. And that's what I felt I was not able to do or see in the hospital setting. And what I love about functional medicine is that you really do see long-term change in people's lives. And that keeps me going. It keeps me going and keeps me wanting to continue because I know that I'm helping to set people up for long-term success. I'm teaching and instilling in my own children how to make good choices, on that scale of poor, good, better, best. Like we want to live at better or best if we can,
Mhm.
and my kids will kind of tease with me or whatever, but you know what? My 10-year-old will go to the store with me and she can pick up an item, read the nutrition label, and know automatically whether or not I'll buy it. And that for me is like such a personal sense of pride that like she'll look at it and say, "Oh, it's got seed oils and put it back, or it's got high fructose corn syrup and put it back." But you know what?
Mm.
That's something that I didn't think that I don't think was really well talked about when I was a child. It wasn't really well known. And so not only are we able to impact people in a professional sense, but I think about like our families, like what they're going to see modeled for them, which I think is so important.
The last few conferences that I've been to, the topic of longevity has really been a big part of it, and epigenetics. You're talking about inheriting things from our families and passing them on. And those are two really big topics. And what you said about life expectancy is so different from lifespan, and it's spot on, right? Like why would we have a shorter life expectancy for our children if we have this modern health system that's so fantastic? But I'm trying to remember the fella's name, but I did an episode where I shared what I learned at a recent conference, and it was an expert in longevity and healthy aging said that he's positive that within the next 10 years they will announce that the potential lifespan of a human is 125 to 150 years, and that really just does not align with where we're headed and what you were just mentioning about health outcomes for our children. And um, it says so much about our potential and the role that functional medicine can play in improving that. So I'm glad you brought that topic up because it's a really important one. And when we have children, it's on our mind.
It is so much on our mind. And when you see your own child make a 180-degree turn, with her behavior, it's so rewarding to see this was a small buy-in, not I mean, I was already all in, but when I began to roll it out for my family piece by piece, and one thing that I will say that I really try to encourage people to do when they're trying to make big changes in their home is I try to really encourage people, don't go cold turkey on everything. Substitute.
Mhm.
I always say when something runs out, you get a better substitute for it. I know that a lot of kids are creatures of habit, right? So they don't want all of their snacks to just be gone all of a sudden. That you can find better options. And I have, you know, one of my most popular videos on my channel is um, shopping at Costco and helping people see this is what I would get. Here are three choices of this item. And I'm going to read the labels with you and I'm going to show you why I picked this one over this one. And so
Mhm.
there's just ways that you can substitute and make improvements because it can be so hard to overhaul everything all at once. And sometimes the small people in our lives are not on board.
It makes me this is kind of a weird thing to share, but I think it's really I always think of it when people talk about their kids won't eat well, is I worked for this veterinarian a long time ago, and he had a dog food that was a really great product that he would sell, and he would get a profit from selling it, and it was very natural. I don't think organic was a big label back then, but sometimes people would come back in and they'd say, "Oh, well, my dog didn't really want to eat it." And he was like, "Well, they're going to get hungry." I always think of that when people talk about kids and food and like what you just said. It's like because what I would do is like when they were little and I would switch for a healthier option for one thing, like you said, replace it as it comes up. I would just go, "Oh, yeah, we don't have that one right now, but we have this one." And eventually that's just the new one, right? And then the next time you replace a different one. And they're a captive audience, right? They're like the dog with the food that they don't like. It's like, I mean, they're gonna eat eventually. And so when your kids are like, "Oh, I don't like this new one," be like, "Well, we don't have the old one anymore," you know?
Yes. Yes.
That one's not in the house. But that could be tough and it's not fun. It's not a fun conversation. But we really do have so much impact over what our kids eat. And sometimes the change is difficult, but you're right, gradual, I think, is the way to go for sure.
Yes, it has made a huge impact in my own household and I just think it's so important, when my kids grow up and they leave me, which I know is going to happen someday, my goal for them in life is that they may or may not want to adopt all of the principles that I've had in our home. I know that during the most formative years of their developmental life, right? I have protected them. I have kept them safe. I have reduced the environmental toxins in our home, right? Like, because we cannot control every situation, and I think that that is unhealthy because that just creates so much extra stress. It is just not possible, as you said, to live a perfect life. But in my home, because I also do homeschool my kids, in my home is where we spend the overwhelming majority of our time. And so that's where I control the environment, right? I don't think it's healthy for us to be so stressed out about every little thing, you know. Do I travel with some of my own things? Yes. If I go to an Airbnb and I see an air freshener, do I take it out? Yes. But there has to be some kind of a balance, right? Where you're not adding a tremendous amount of stress over health that's going to negate the health choices you're making.
Well, and I think even more than what you're saying about, like, providing them with that environment is you've taught them how to think for themselves and question things that might impact their health, which I think is gonna carry them long term, because my sons are the same, and they're gonna make choices as they get older, they're teenagers and above, I can't control what they do when they're out, they make food choices without me, and I don't want to. I want them to make their own choices, but they know the difference and how it'll impact their health, which I think that's the most important thing. We're like getting them a solid start. And you talking about reading the labels, I was thinking about when I was a kid. I think I remember because we did not have a good diet in our home. And we also did not talk about food and health much. And I remember like the impression was that high fructose corn syrup was made from corn. So it was like a vegetable. It was like a vegetable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've come a long way.
Yes, we have. I can remember all of the different fads, low fat, high fat, are carbs bad, is coffee bad, are eggs good? It's so hard to keep track. And again, that's the reason why we need qualified nurses to be giving instruction because there's so much confusion out there, and I think just still, even in this age of information, people are truly not informed. People will hear one thing and take it to be the gospel truth. But it's like, well, what I'm trying to teach my kids, let's evaluate that and think about that critically and decide, does this make sense? Does this make sense? Does this align with what we're trying to accomplish with our lives? Does this match what we're trying to do? And if it doesn't, get rid of it.
I love with my boys, sometimes they'll make food choices that, they'll be with friends and they'll come back and they'll go, "Oh gosh, my stomach hurts." And I'll go, "Well, what'd you eat?" And then they're like, "Oh, yeah, you're right."
Yes, it's like,
Okay. So sorry.
no, it's like
Go ahead.
at the holidays, my one daughter was like, "Oh, I ate too many cookies. I had too much sugar. I can feel it." I said, "Yeah, but now you know what that feels like, and maybe you won't want to do it again."
All right. And it's good practice for us for with our clients. We could do it with our kids too.
Absolutely, they're a very good captive audience.
So, Lindsey, before we wrap up, I wanted to ask, what insights would you share with a nurse that's listening that is considering a similar path to you, but hasn't taken any steps yet?
I would encourage you to just go ahead and do it. There is no downside, right? We have to be lifelong learners as nurses because everything is always evolving and changing and technology and information. And so we have to owe it to ourselves and to our patients to stay up to date. And this is really where the future of healthcare, I believe, is going. If you want to be able to provide the best education and the best care to your patients and also to yourself, jump in to functional medicine and promise you you will not regret it. There's so much more out there, like we were saying, as far as opportunities for places to practice. If you're in a place that is not aligning with your personal values, there is so much more that you can do as an RN that you don't need to go back to school to get an NP license. You don't need to go back to do a lot of formal education in that way. You can practice under your scope in so many ways, and you can start implementing the information right where you are because you will be learn information that applies to patients of all ages, of all diagnoses, of all conditions, and you'll only make yourself more educated and well-rounded.
And you'll never be bored again.
The rabbit hole just continues. But I would also
Yeah.
say to go into it with an open mind because for me, there was definitely a point where I had to unlearn things that I thought I knew to be true. And so go into it with an open mind and evaluate for yourself. The information that we've been taught is usually just coming from one side, so use those critical thinking skills you have and begin to question and research and find out for yourself. You know, there are so many resources available for you that as a nurse that you'll be able to understand and appreciate, and they will really open your eyes to so much that you didn't think was even possible.
And I don't know about you, but then as I learned that, I was like, oh my God, that's so obvious. Like so many things about functional medicine, once you learn them and you, like you said, unlearn, then you're like, wow, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, there's just a whole lot of common sense in functional medicine, right? That health doesn't, you can't inject health, you can't ingest health, right? Health comes from inside. And so that has to now a lot can be done from your diet, of course, but I tell you, I had to unlearn so much and just realize that what is true health, what is true wellness, what do I want for myself, my family, my patients, what is it that I want the best for them, and I know that other nurses do as well. And so we need to go into it with an open mind and be ready to dive in head first because there is so much waiting for you on the other side.
That is the truth. Lindsey, thank you so much. I think this was a great conversation. And I think it was so many different things that we touched on that apply to every nurse I know. So I'm really grateful that you were able to share your insights and we could commiserate on a few things.
Yes.
Thank you for being on the show today.
Oh, yes. It was really fun. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And I'm going to share in the show notes, it'll share how to connect with Lindsey's Instagram page and her YouTube channel. And until next time, everybody, be well. Thank you for tuning in to the Functional Nurse Podcast. If today's episode resonated with you, be sure to subscribe and leave a review. It helps other nurses find this movement. To learn more about our programs and join the community at IFN, visit fxnursing.com. Together, we're not just rethinking healthcare, we are rebuilding it from the inside out.